I'm having technical problems.
Obviously.
So, and then we're going to welcome Wendy Veen at some point. Sarah, I don't know who that Sarah is. And Sarah, could you share your video? Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon.
So every Tuesday we have what we call the Parashat Shavua, which is the Torah portion of the week. And this week we're beginning the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Torah. And we'll be looking at the very beginning of it and explore both the issues of the census as well as the significance of having people step up, be counted, and also the shared leadership qualities. So a lot of things that are going on in this week's Torah portion. And as we begin to the study, we say the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Praise you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, who've sanctified us with mitzvot, and you've commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So let's go ahead and open up the text. I'll make this a little bit larger. This is the Alan Markman rule to get a little bit. So what I want to do is read this is the very beginning of the book of Numbers first, just the first 19 verses. And then we're going to go look at some of the commentary with it as well. And so, Alan, do you want to go ahead and read that first part?
Okay, I will.
For that, I'm going to make it even larger.
No, that's good.
How's that?
That's fine, thank you. On the first day on the first day of the second month in the second year following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, Adonai spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying, "Take a census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male head by head. You and Aaron should record them by their groups from the age of 20 years up, all those in Israel who are able to bear arms. Associated with you shall be a man from each tribe, each one of these heads of his ancestral house. These are the names of the men who shall assist you. From the tribe of Reuven, Elizur, son of Shedur. From Simeon, Shelumiel, son of Zurish Shaddai. From Judah, Nachshon ben Aminadav. From Issachar, Nathaniel, son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, Elishama, son of Amihud. From Manasseh, Gamliel, son of Pedahzur."
Aren't you glad that you volunteered? And there's more. There's more.
There's more, okay. From Benjamin, I knew there had to be more. Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gideoni. From Dan, Achiezer, son of Amish Shaddai. From Asher, Pagiel, son of Ochran. From Gad, Eliasaph, son of Duel. From Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enan. Those are the elected of the assembly, the chieftain of their ancestral tribes. They are the heads of the contingents of Israel. So Moses and Aaron took those who were designated by name, and on the first day of the second month, they convoked the whole community who were registered by the clans of their ancestral houses, the names of those aged 20 years and over being listed head by head. As Adonai had commanded Moses, so he recorded them in the wilderness in Sinai.
Good. So before we, plow into the commentary, that's the section we're going to look at. So let's pause for a second and get our initial reactions and thoughts as we receive this message and sort of process it. What could it, A, what do you think it was trying to convey? And B, what it means to you?
I think they were getting ready for war.
Okay, then what would give you that cue?
Well, they wanted males of age that could bear arms.
Good. So why would you? So if you're getting ready for war, you're getting the account of who is possible to be drafted, I suppose, right?
Right.
Who here had to sign up for the register for the draft? Right? Alan, you didn't have to register for the draft?
Yes, I did.
No, Alan weren't.
I was drafted, went into the Air Force.
Right. So you already had it. So we still in this country have males register for the draft, but we don't have females registered for the draft, which is interesting in the 21st century. In Israel, it's both men and women who serve. Of course, it's a much smaller country, and as we have been witnessing over the last couple of days, they are frequently under duress, under attack, and it's everyone is needed. But what do you think about that? That it's just males that are called up. That we're not even called up to serve in the United States. We women are not even required to register. Is that correct?
That's
I
good.
believe so.
What do you
You
think
can
about that?
volunteer.
Yeah, you have to volunteer.
They can volunteer, but they. What about simply the registration?
I didn't
No.
even realize we still had males having to register.
Register, but there is no draft, of course. We
Right.
did away with a draft in 73, is that right? 73, 74.
Yeah.
But there is it was necessary to register. Although and that was that last little bit from Nixon's reign back in 73 or 74, whatever it was, when you first had to give them your name. We were just pulling out of Vietnam, so I suppose it was 74. So I was like 1 or 2 years where we didn't even have to register. But my 3 sons, they all have, they all have to be a part of that.
Yeah. My son too.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, I'm happy that Alan with 2 L's read and not me.
That's very good. Me too. Me too. So knowing that, for instance, in the land of Israel, as we're talking about right now, as Moses and Aaron were saying that we're going to have to get just the males signed up. Why is that not the case in modern Israel?
Why is that not the case in modern Israel?
Yeah, well, why
They
are
need
both men-
everybody. They need everybody who can defend the country.
All right. Well, there's more modern Israelis than there were way back in the wilderness. Still, things have evolved and things have changed a little bit. What else about this passage strikes you?
Well,
Maybe-
I mean,
maybe-
listening to Alan, hearing all the names of the tribes or of whatever,
Right.
and everything, that was fascinating to me.
Right. And I love that, Barbara, because here we had at the beginning of the Torah, the description of the creation of the entire universe in a couple of paragraphs. And yes, and yet it is meticulously going through from tribe to tribe to say, here's the representative, from this tribe and from that
Yeah.
tribe, and here are the names. Now, some of the names resonate with us because they have played another role either in the Torah or they were significant in Midrashim and commentary. So, for instance, Nachshon ben Aminadav, we have plenty of stories about him. And also because he was from the tribe of Judah, that made him a little bit more significant. Still, these other names, why bother with it? And I think that's interesting, the significance of names. Interestingly, on Thursday night, we're going to have for our Bible and Beers, the Brotherhood meeting. We'll talk about names, and I'll bring out the dictionary of Hebrew names, and we'll talk about the significance of the names that we give each other, the names that we received as well. So it was a nice pickup, Barbara. Margie, what else did you have to share?
Just the fact that it's the book of Numbers, and it begins with, how do you figure out the numbers? You do a census, which I was looking up, and the first one was done in 3800 BC in Babylon. And I had no idea. But it was also for milk and honey and, livestock, which, if you think about our social and commerce lives now, not to mention computers and the binary things, we are incredibly dependent on numbers and knowing the right numbers.
So when you, just this year, we've completed a census. And I think it's by mandate every 10 years we have one. And it has some great effect on our community. For instance, depending on your population, if it goes up or down, you may gain a seat in Congress or you may lose a seat in Congress. Colorado this year, we
Gain one.
gained one, which is pretty cool. New York, I believe, lost one or two. There are a couple of states that lost a few, and a couple of states that gained a few. I think California lost one too, didn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, but Texas grew by two. Very interesting, the importance of it. Also, yes, for that, right. Sarah said they all moved to Colorado. That's why our houses are so expensive to buy a house anymore. That's true. But so it's interesting that you mentioned that the census included livestock, etc. Because what interest does a government have in knowing what the livestock and agricultural holdings are? Why would a government want to know that?
Taxes.
There you go. Right. So government always has one interest. It's for taxes, which is, hey, what's out there? What can I gain from it? So yes, there's a military reason for a census because I have to see where my people, how many people are there, where they live. We say the tribal holdings, but for them it wasn't just the family. The various tribes had regions in Israel where they were going to be assigned. So we can look at that as tribal or provinces. The other would be for taxation reasons. The government has to know what its resources are. And the government is always interested in that. So what else? Finally, here's Moses and Aaron. Moses, the great lawgiver. Aaron, who's the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol. Did they carry out this census by themselves?
No.
What'd they have?
The heads of the clans.
Right, that's why we named them, right? So every tribe said, wait a minute, there's going to be a counting. We don't want it to be that our region is undercounted or underrepresented. We want to make sure that whoever's doing accounting, we have a say in it. We want to make sure that there's an oversight that's equitable. That's key. And then one other thing, is there some taboo in Judaism about a census, about counting people?
Yeah, I think when we count for a minyan, we say not one, not two, not three, not four, and I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, it's an old Yiddish tradition. Nicht ein, nicht zwei, right? But it's the idea being that if you count a person, that there's a little bit of foreboding about it. A little, it's almost like inviting some negative.
Or some risk.
The ayin hara.
Yeah. So there's going to be an interesting comment in it, because later on the Torah will say specifically, don't do a census. But then there were a couple of times when there was a census that was mandated. So how can we have both ideas? One, that there's some kind of understanding that by counting people and I suppose reducing them to numbers is inappropriate. And on the other hand, it's commanded. And in fact, the beginning of this whole Torah portion has Su'u'et Rosh, count the heads. And what kind of expression is that? It doesn't say count how many people there are. It says count the heads. And there are commentators that will focus on this. So let's look at some of the things that the ancient commentators had to share about this. So I'm going to first get to, on this very first verse, an interesting passage from the Midrash Rabbah Bamidbar. And so just on this very first verse, there's a couple of passages in the Midrash that I brought. So I don't know, Margie, anyone else, you guys want to read this passage, please?
I'd be happy to. And God spoke to Moses in the Sinai wilderness, Numbers 1:1. Why the Sinai wilderness? From here, the sages taught that the Torah was given through three things: fire, water, and wilderness. How do we know it was given through fire? From Exodus 19:18. And Mount Sinai was all in smoke as God had come down upon it in fire. How do we know it was given through water? As it says in Judges 5:4, the heavens dripped and the clouds dripped water at Sinai. How do we know it was given through wilderness? As it says above, and God spoke to Moses in Sinai wilderness. And why was the Torah given through these three things? Just as fire, water, and wilderness are free to all the inhabitants of the world, so too are the words of Torah free to them. As it says in Isaiah 55:1, "O all who are thirsty, come for water, even if you have no money." Another explanation, and God spoke to Moses in the Sinai wilderness, anyone who does not make themselves ownerless like the wilderness cannot acquire the wisdom of the Torah. Therefore, it says the Sinai wilderness.
Wow, yeah, I thought it was such a fabulous little midrash. So two different teachings. One is the wilderness is open to all. And so therefore, no one should say, well, I didn't go to the right schools. I didn't come from the right families. No. The Torah is not owned by anybody. This connection with God is not owned, the exclusive domain of one person or one group. The connection with God is open to everybody. Come, everyone come, and take part in it. And just as water is essential for life and fire is essential for our warmth and our well-being, our security, the Torah is a part of that as well. But what is that? So it's a nice little homily. But what about this passage that says you have to make yourself like the wilderness? You have to make yourself like an ownerless wasteland in order to connect with Torah, to connect with God. What the heck does that mean?
You have to be open-minded. You have to almost be open-minded to, a wild extent. You have to question previous ownerships. That's it.
Okay, well, that was good. Who else has something to share? Why make yourself like the wilderness, or the necessity of making yourself like the wilderness in order to connect with Torah, to connect with God? Go ahead, Sarah.
I think that if you know the wilderness, it's sort of like meditation. Then you're able to work with the people.
Okay, so there's a meditative quality to wilderness. Sarah, you raised your hand.
Sarah, you're muted.
Yeah,
I was going to tack on to what Margie just said, because I feel like from my background, she just expressed it very well for me. From my background, having all of these conceptions, I feel like that's kind of the space that I've had to come to, is approach everything with an open mind, because I'm rereading a lot of scriptures that I know one way, and I'm just trying to release it all and have a very open mind to a new understanding of something that I think I know. And so I just wanted to tack on to what she was saying, that concept of having an openness, I feel like is already helping me to have a better relationship, because I'm willing to let go of old beliefs, and new beliefs are coming in that are really refreshing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I again, banking on both of those comments, the idea that here, the wilderness, there are no structures, there's no there, right? It's open. And therefore there's a freedom from the preconceived. But here's another part as well. The wilderness is like ownerless, right? So the grand palace, the grand facade comes with it some pretension, a lot of pretension, and a lot of confidence, self-confidence, sometimes arrogance, that if you're going to connect with Torah, you're going to connect with God, the first thing has to be a sense of humility, right? How can I be open to really being inspired by that which is beyond me if I'm not willing to let go of me, if I'm not willing to step back from my own pretensions, expectations, demands, and just say, wait a minute, I'm going to just back off a little bit here and take in this magnificent thing. What's the first thing that Moses did when he first encountered God?
His shoes off
Yeah. Well, but where was he?
in the wilderness.
He was in the wilderness and he saw something.
The burning bush.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was his reaction?
He saw a bush that wasn't consumed.
All in fear. Yeah.
Right. But it was not just fear, it was also, wonder. He was like, wow. So he was open to this new experience. He's open to it, saying, wait a minute, it's not just about me chasing after these sheep, right? And my busy schedule and what distraction I have. It's no, I'm open to being wowed, which I think is so huge. Very good. So with that, we got Michael coming on with his mask as he's giving shots to a bunch of people. Hey, Michael. So we're going to skip back to this text. That was just the first of the Midrashim. There's a second one also from Midrash Rabbah, and it makes reference to another passage. So this is from later on in Numbers. The second time we have a census in the Torah, specifically in the book of Numbers. And it says, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, assail the Midianites and defeat them, for they have assailed you by trickery. They practiced against you because of the affair of Peor and because of the affair of the kinswoman Cosbi, the daughter of Midianite chieftain, who was killed at the time of the plague of the count of Peor. So that's what happened. And then it says, when the plague was over, the very next verse, it says, when the plague was over, Adonai said to Moses and to Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, take a census of the whole Israelite community from the age of 20 years up by their ancestral houses, all Israelites able to bear arms. So in the actual Midrash, it doesn't quote this it doesn't quote this entire passage. It rather just gives an oblique message, reference to it. And yet the idea is that they're going to wonder, how come we're always doing these censuses after a tragedy, after a setback? And so that's its take on it. So let's, who'd like to read this passage? This is from later on in the Midrashic collection of Bamidbar, the 21st chapter. Who'd like to read this?
I'll read it.
Go ahead, please.
Take a census every time that they fell. They were required to be numbered. The matter is comparable to the wolves who went into the midst of the flock. The owner of the flock was obliged to count them to know how many were missing. Another interpretation, why did they count them here? The matter of comparable to is comparable to a shepherd to whom the householder has delivered a flock after numbering them. He was fulfilled his guardianship, a flock after numbering them. He has fulfilled his guardianship.
After he is fulfilled.
After he has fulfilled his guardianship, when he returns, then it is necessary to them to be numbered. Thus, when Israel went out from Egypt, the Holy One, blessed be he, delivered them to Moses after numbering them, as stated in number 1. The Adonai spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert. Take Adonai in the Sinai desert. Take a census. Likewise, in the Sinai desert, take a census. And I just read that twice. Then the children of Israel traveled from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot. Ergo, he received them with numbering in Egypt. So when he on foot, ergo, he received them with
He was
numbering.
about to pass away from the world in the plains of Moab after completing the guardianship. He returned them with a number. I know it's sort of a confused text with brackets and parentheses. Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
But the main message was that we do the census after Israel has fallen, after some bad thing happened, right? So what do you think they were referring to in this section right here at the beginning of the book of Numbers? What a bad thing had just happened.
The Exodus?
Well, the Exodus was a good thing, and that was 2 years earlier. Well, what happened while we were at Sinai? That was a bad thing.
Oh,
Golden calf.
Right. And so we had the golden calf who had fallen down at the very moment getting this revelation, at the very moment connecting with God. There were those who didn't want just to connect with God. There were those people who wanted to physically, materially possess God. Right? That's what idolatry is. I'm going to make something that I can touch, I can feel, I can point to, I can hold, I can hug, I can paint, right? I can put my face on it and say, that's God, right? And the Torah says, no, don't. I'm not a sculpture. I'm not a painting. I'm not a planet. I'm not a person. I'm not a thing. Don't make me a thing that you can manipulate and that you can say it looks like you, right? I'm not your God. I'm God. I'm all God, right? That's and so don't try to imagine me as a thing. But people, we've been saying that for over 3,000 years. But people have a thing for making God a thing, right? So we had this golden calf, and that was our first big setback. And it also there was a little civil war that happened at the time too. There was a confrontation. So right after all of that, when Moses said, "Who's with me? Who's with us? Who's going to get away from all that?" Because they were raised in Egypt. In Egypt, they had all these idols, and idolatrous practices were what we were all about. So Moses said, "Who's really ready to move on from that?" And so again, after that, they had to have accounting. And after towards the conclusion of Numbers, as they were fighting with the Midianites, and this was right after Balak and all of his machinations and the cursing of Israel. Again, it was a big division within the community, a great threat to the community, that they had to have accounting. Hey, Lewis, good to see you. So again, that is the origin of the taboo against the counting, that it only happens after a terrible thing. What about those the parables of the shepherd who has to count his flock, or the neighbor as returning? You have to count your things after they were borrowed. Anybody?
Yes, I think to show some responsibility that you had for those that flock, that you guarded them and you brought them back intact. You brought back as many as you took out.
That's wonderful. Very good. Very good. So let's get back to our text. That's terrific. Thank you. So now that was the first verse. Here's the second verse. So there's some wonderful commentary. The first one is going to be from Sforno, a 16th century Italian rabbi, on the commandment to su'ul et rosh, to lift up the head. There's going to be a lot of commentary on that, what that means to have a census by counting the heads, lifting the head. So let's see what Sforno has to say. Anybody?
I'll read.
Please. Thank you, Barbara.
To organize them so that they could proceed to the land of Israel immediately without delay, each one of them knowing to which unit or flag he belonged. At that point, no war of conquest had even been envisaged. The assumption having been that God would remove the inhabitants of the land of Canaan so that no face-to-face encounter would even be necessary. Evidence from Isaiah 17:9 suggests that, in fact, at least partially, this even occurred after the 40 years in the desert. The prophet there reports that once again, as at the time when the Amorite and the Hittite abandoned their cities in the face of the advancing armies of the Israelites, history will repeat itself.
Now, in this bracket right here, this is an editorial comment by the modern editor of this text, saying that what Sforno is doing, his comment is based on the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which is interesting that he would be making reference to a story that, or an aspect of this story that was appeared only in the Septuagint, not in the Hebrew Bible. And second, that he is making reference to a passage from the Jerusalem Talmud. So Barbara, if you'll continue on this little passage as well, where he says, "B'mispater shemot, you shall count the names or number the names."
At that time, the names of the individuals reflected their specific individuality in recognition of their individual virtues. They were not merely named after their fathers or other departed relatives. References to names reflecting on individuals' virtues are found in Exodus 33:17, when God said to Moses that he would,
B'Shem, I have singled you out by name. So when we give names to our children, right, we give them, why do we name someone? How do we name them?
what do you mean?
Right? So somebody, Bobby or Zadie passed away, we want to give them Bobby or Zadie's name, right?
Right.
But in the early parts of the Torah, and especially as Leah and Rachel were naming the 12 tribes of Israel, they're the 12 children, they were given names for certain qualities. Like, I shall now name him Dan, because God is judged favorably for me, for Dan being judge, right? And Yaakov was named Yaakov because he held the heel of Esav, right? So the names had specific meanings. So I mentioned it because I have a baby naming coming up, and the parents want to say, or saying to the kids, the grandparents are saying to the children, who are now the parents, but they may be mommy and daddy, but from grandparents' point of view, the new parents are children. So I want to instruct my child, who's now a daddy, to name the baby in honor of this elder, right, who just passed away. And so the parents call me up and they go, "Rick, can we don't want to name him that, right? I don't want to name the poor thing Methuselah or something, right?" So I do my best to side on behalf of the parents, but I mean the new parents. So I'd have to correct my name in there, right? So who else has a?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
My great grandfather, Yitzhak, which means laugh. So I guess he laughed a lot.
Yeah. He wasn't named because he laughed as a baby. Why was he named Yitzhak?
I don't know.
He was probably
Named
named
after
Yitzhak,
somebody.
right? Because maybe his Zadie was Yitzi.
I see.
Right. Right. So anyway, an interesting comment by Sforno saying that it's not that in those days the names that we had. This gets to what Barbara, you had mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Margie, that said that how come all these names are there? They're there, because we don't usually get all these names. Maybe they're telling us a little bit about the character of these people. So let's see what else. Getting back up. Okay, now the third verse, and then I have a long comment from Nachmanides, the 13th century rabbi from Spain and Israel, and he's commenting on basically this whole passage as well. Rashi, I'll give a little bit of background on what Ramban has to say. He quotes Rashi for saying something that we don't have. If we look in our commentaries and our critical editions of the Rashi comments, we don't have this thing that Nachmanides says Rashi has. Rashi was about 100 years earlier than Nachmanides, but that doesn't mean that Ramban, Nachmanides, is wrong. It's just that over time, there are critical additions of text that sometimes are missing. Maybe the copyist left it out. Maybe it's a later edition of it that removed it. So anyway, Ramban, Nachmanides, as he frequently does, will take Rashi to task and then come up with his own opinion. So who would like to read what Ramban had to say?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, Spain and Eretz Israel, but as for Rashi expressions when he wrote, this is as one says to an executioner, take that man's head.
So he's commenting on su'u et rosh, literally lift up the head. And Rashi, who's 12th century France and Germany, is thinking, what is that saying? Su'u et rosh, lift up the head. That's the kind of thing that an executioner would say. So the turn of phrase that's weird to him.
So it is not clear to me why the sages should interpret the verse in this derogatory manner. If it is because the people counted here died in the desert, therefore he said, take the head, whereas in the case of the tribe of Levi, God said, number the children of Levi, since they were not included in the decree, that they die in the desert. This cannot be so, for in the second census taken of those who were to come into the land, it also used the same expression, take the head of all the congregation of the children of Israel.
Okay, and that's a confusing phrase, but let me help you with it. So Ramban said maybe the reason they use the phrase in the Torah, Su'u et rosh, take up the head, and that was interpreted by Rashi in the 12th century Spain, was because that first generation in the wilderness, what happened? They were all going to die in the wilderness, right? They were not going to get to the promised land because of the golden calf, but even more so because when they finally got to the border of Israel, of the promised land, just 2 years after the Exodus, the spies had this bad report, and they all got nervous, and God said, well, if you don't believe in it, then you won't get it. So you're going to die in the wilderness, right? And they did. So he said, well, maybe Rashi was interpreting this as that it's an evil decree because that generation all died out. He said, but that can't be, because that same phrase was used later on as the children of Israel 40 years or 38 years later were at the border, and that's a whole nother generation. So that generation wasn't going to be wasn't going to perish in the wilderness. Rather, that was a generation that was going to go in. So he said he's trying to figure out what the heck Rashi's saying, right? As he always does, in order to say, no, I think Rashi's wrong. Let me tell you what it really meant. So this is a little bit easier piece, Louis. But in the Agada.
Okay, but in the Agada of Vayikra, the rabbis explain it is an expression of praise for the people. The term Seu always means greatness, as it is written, Pharaoh, Yisa, shall lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy office, said the Holy One. Blessed be he, to Israel. I have given you an exaltation of the head, and I have likened you to myself, just as I am exalted above all inhabitants of the world. As it is said, thine is the kingdom, O eternal, and thou art exalted as head above all. So to you also I have given an elevation of the head. As it is said, lift up the head of all the congregations of the children of Israel, thus fulfilling that which is said, and he hath lifted up a horn for his people. And similarly, it is said, and the eternal thy God will set thee on high above all the nations of the earth.
Right. So Su'u isn't just lifting up the head for execution, i.e. take off his head. Ramban said, no, it's really Su'u, lift up your head in pride, as an exaltation to lift up your head. So he has just the opposite take as Rashi did, and he continues on, and then, so Louis, you're on a roll, buddy.
I have found, can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
muted. I have found further in Bamidbar, Sinai Rabbah, that the sages have stated, said Rabbi Pinchas in the name of Rabbi Idi, What is the meaning of that which is written at the beginning of this book? Se'u et rosh, take the head. It does not say lift up the head, elevate the head, but it says Se'u et rosh, like a man who says to an executioner, take this man's head. Here he gave a hint to Moses, Se'u et rosh, meaning that if the people are worthy, they will become exalted, just as it is written, Pharaoh, Yisa, shall lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy office. But if they are not worthy, they will all die, just as it is written, Pharaoh, Yisa, shall lift up thy head from off thee and shall hang thee on a tree. Thus the expression Se'ud et Rosh, which as Rashi explained, is used in connection with execution, is to be interpreted according to the intentions of the speaker in a good way for those who are good. And since it is also an expression of elevation, and it is used here in the first census, he used the same expression in the second census.
Okay, sort of a confusing piece, but what do you make of this at the conclusion? Because he says Rashi says it's just meant for the execution, but it's not always execution. Sometimes it's exaltation. And at the end, he quotes. He goes back and he quotes from one of the midrashim, saying, "Well, it could be both. It could be either. It depends on the intent of the speaker, the intent of the census." So what are we to make of this here? We're in the 21st century reading this commentary. It's stunning.
Well, I mean, in the United States, our census is used for hopefully positive things. We don't usually get an accurate measure because there are people who are petrified to participate. But it's a measurement. It's a measurement as to what type of representation we're going to have, how much federal aid we're going to get, you know.
That's Barbara, that's perfect, but follow that up a little bit. So if we look at the intention of the people taking the census in a positive, that'll be for our aid, our representation, and all the rest, that's positive. So let's get to the fear of those who don't want to participate. What are they worried about?
The information could be used against them.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're saying, wait a minute, if we get counted, they're gonna say, now we know where you are. Now we can persecute you for whatever various reasons. Maybe because they've come from places where they're used to governments doing that. Maybe they have had negative experiences with the government. Some people do not want to be on the public docket. They don't want to be identified so easily. So
there's been studies on this in economics, sociology. There's a principal agency problem where we're supposed to be represented by the government, right? But we don't necessarily. There's a disconnect, and sometimes the government doesn't necessarily use those numbers for the good of the whole. It can become something where it's something used for the government, people in the government themselves, and so therefore there are some people that don't understand. They fear that, or they don't understand the census itself. They just are not educated.
Right.
They don't understand that it may be used for their good too.
But
Well,
it's important for us to understand a little bit better why those who are not enthusiastic about a census, where they're coming from. I'm sorry, Barbara, you had a quote.
No, I think it's been reported that the lack of participation in getting the COVID vaccine, particularly in our immigrant population, they're afraid that they're going to be counted in a negative way because you're put in a database. And so, I mean, that's an issue. That's a big issue too.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. So there's a trust thing with the government. Margie.
I was just going to say it's about trust, and the positive side is when you are named and you're willing to identify, you're willing to be the head of the tribe that does the census, you're willing to take on that responsibility. then it's clear, hopefully clearer to the people who don't have the trust. They can watch what you do and see what happens. And, you know, you are representing then Israel and God and as Israel's covenant. So you're not just to Jews, but to your fellow citizens.
Yeah, very, very good. That's part of our responsibility, though, to make sure that when our government is doing the count, that it is not for nefarious purposes.
Right.
It is going to be for the well-being of the people. I want to get, because we have still like 10 minutes or so, I'm going to get down. This was terrific, that every tribe has to have a representative. This is verse 4. So who would like, the Sephorno takes up on that. Anyway,
I'll read it.
go ahead. Matt.
This is emphasized to show that no one challenged the authority and authenticity of the people representing themselves as the heads of his family. When the count occurred,
Etchem, for
Etchem,
you,
in the presence of the family heads, each one testifying to the age of the individuals concerned, no one would dare challenge the accuracy of the data provided by the family head.
right? So you had, it wasn't just a representative from the from each of the tribes. It was a person who was one of the leaders of that community, someone whose authority was respected and approved by all the other members of that tribe. So that was significant. So, and now we have, of course, the names. There's a couple other pieces I wanted to have. Rashi, go ahead, Jerry, if you'll do it, Rashi, basically on this same passage.
These were those called of the congregation, those who were called upon for every matter of importance that happened in the congregation.
Right. So wasn't that these heads of the tribes were only called out for a census, but rather we had, if you think about this, who went up with Moses to Mount Sinai for that revelation? There were 70 people. There were representatives from each of the tribes who were up on the mountain. Theoretically, 6 members from each of the tribes, but 6 times 12, of course, is 72. 2 of the ones who were not representative, who did not make it, they were pulled out. Eldad and Medad, they stayed in the camp. They started to prophesy on their own. And when Joshua said, Moses, look, Eldad and Medad, they're not up on Mount Sinai. They're still prophesying down in the among the people. Moses said, would that all of my people know that they had this connection with God, that they were all prophets. So it was, I think it's far too much to say, well, it's evidence of a democratization of ancient Israel. Well, no, ancient Israel was not a democracy. And yet it wasn't totally a hierarchical system in which we had just the king and the court down to the various to various provinces, but rather each of the provinces, each of the tribal holdings had their own representative. No major decision would be made without them. So it's not quite a democracy, but it was a very important step forward. Anybody? Okay, good. So we have just a couple more sentences. And this is from Rashi and Ora Chaim. We got this part up here. We got that one. I want to get down to Ora Chaim. Jerry, you want to go ahead and read this part again?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the entire community on the first of the second month, the Torah announced that the Israelites assembled on the very day the instructions were issued. This is proof that everyone was equipped with a book showing who he was and who his father was. The people did not have to go look for corroboration of their family status by looking for witnesses, etc. This is what the Torah meant by the word being written next to the words on the first of the second month.
Right. So that it wasn't just oral, there was a written record of it. And then finally, Rashbam, I thought, had just wonderful comment. You want to head and finish that one off too?
Sure. The reason why the Torah mentions the location of this court is because during the second such court in Numbers,
Not court, it's account. The count meaning the
count.
census.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The count in Numbers 26:3, the Torah mentions that it took place in the wilderness around Moab prior to the assault on the land of Israel before crossing the Jordan River. At that time, after the death of Aaron, Moses issued these instructions to Eleazar, Aaron's son, and the successor.
Okay, so this was Rashbam is the grandson of Rashi who made that comment. That again at these it's not just at a time of setback. It's at a momentous occasion. We're about to be assembled right before we come into the promised land in which Joshua will lead us. So we need that census maybe to take account for us after a setback, the golden calf, after the revolution, really, with the spies who came back after Israel and saying, this is a land that's going to be too hard for us. But there were also times in which you had the census to say, no, we have to take account for ourselves as to what we are and what we're capable of to have confidence to move forward. So again, we have both the negative reasons for the census to take measure of ourselves after a setback, as well as a positive count to saying, we can do this. Let's take the measure of ourselves and realize that we are enough. And they both coincide. Go ahead, Barbara.
This is a slight digression. My friend, my Ethiopian Jewish friend in Israel, he is looking for a bride. And so I said, don't you have, someone in your community? And he said, they have to go back 7 generations to prove purity. So somewhere records were kept, right? But 7 generations, that's a long way to go back.
That's a very long time. That's a very long time.
Yeah.
In Yiddish, they make reference to it as yichus. So especially in the Haredi families, having yichus, i.e. you descend from a Hasidic family and that there were maybe some rabbis in your background, that elevates you as an eligibility to become a bride or a groom.
When I meet a native, I always quiz them about their backgrounds and everything. As one man said, he's 7 generations. I said, that's 1700 something. He said, yes, that's right.
That's quite a far way. Good. So anyway, I know Sarah mentioned that knowing that it's going to online. It's not like it's going to be the whole World Wide Web is going to be on it. But please, anyone who feels that they don't want to have to show your face, that's perfectly fine. You're always welcome. Okay, it's your voice that we care about and the participation as we explore these texts. We're almost to the end of this day, but I thought it was fascinating that here's just these first 19 verses at the very beginning of Numbers. As you start to read them at first, you go, oh, what is it there? But there was a lot there, and there's a lot there that really connects with us as well. And I think counting on yourself and being counted on is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you realize, wait a minute, being counted on is a little bit of pressure and a little bit of responsibility, and I've got to take stock of myself after a setback. On the other hand, I'm going to take account and realize that I've made of the stuff that is capable of going forward. So Yoni and I were just talking right before the session. We put out the survey. How many of you guys filled out the survey about the high holidays? Right? Margie goes, is it too late? Well, no, I tell you, it's not too late, because here's the thing. We're going to do another counting right after sometime at the beginning of July. And the idea was we want to have a little snapshot right now where people are. And a lot of the comments were, well, we just want to follow the CDC. But also there was a lot of people, and we're gonna release all the final information. It just came out just a second or so ago that Yoni sent to the staff. We'll send it through the board, and then it'll be released to the congregation at some point, so you can get a vision of that snapshot as well as we go through it. But regardless, it seems like most people are looking at a hybrid. You know, I'm willing to come into the building for a couple of the services, but not necessarily for all the services. I'm willing to come in for, say, like 500, but not necessarily 1,500 people. And so we're all getting back and with people who are vaccinated, but not necessarily with all the people who aren't vaccinated. And what does that mean, and how are we going to measure it? So that little snapshot brings up almost as many questions as it gives answers, but those are good questions that moves us along. So I'm thinking, and on one hand, that it's the census that we have after a setback. After a setback, you take a census and you make you count to see where the heck are we? Who's left, right? And we have taken a hit in the community. Everyone knows that. We've taken a big hit in the community. And there are people who are going to be having some trepidation about coming back into a community. What does that mean to worship side by side, shoulder to shoulder with people? What was normative for 1,000 years is not so much normative right now. We're going to have to reinvent that. So taking a census, taking stock after the setback, I thought that was really very cool. And then maybe in July, maybe we'll have more of a sense of, dare I say, herd immunity. I'm not going to say that. But a higher percentage of people who will be vaccinated will have further rulings and guidance from the CDC. And then maybe we can make another census after that and get some more information. I want a little shout out to Michael, who's out there giving the shots, everybody. As they say in England, you're jabbing them, right? You're jabbing them.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's really slow out here, by the way. I'm at Dick's Sporting Goods, and we've probably got 200 people total. So it's not been very busy.
Yeah. So Michael, are you saying that we should get the word out that now's the time to get? Does someone have to have an appointment to go to see you, or can anyone just go down there?
They do need an appointment. It's easy enough to get. We will take walk-ins, but we prefer appointments.
So push comes to shove, they can just go down there. But if they want to get a reservation, how do they do that?
Go online, and I think it's through CDC or COVID Check Colorado.
COVID Check Colorado or CDC.org. Or if you get too confused, just go on down there and look for the guy in the big yellow and big orange coat.
That'll get you probably quite a few.
There you go. That's good. Michael,
where are you located?
I'm at around 60th in Quebec.
The
Dick's Sporting Goods Park.
Right. Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you for being one of our heroes.
Thank you. Enjoy it.
Guys. Hey, give our love to Kathy too.
I will.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's doing pretty good. She's still in the rehab. Maybe I'll see her Friday.
God willing. God willing. All right, everybody. Yeah. Yoni, thank you for all that you do. Everybody, I look forward to seeing you, hopefully maybe for Lunch and Learn on Thursday. We're going to look at the Temple Mount stuff, and that's in the news. What do you think, right? And some response on religious Jews going up on the Temple Mount. What does that mean, right? So some very interesting things there. Plus, of course, we'll look at the news, Lunch and Learn. And then on Thursday night, dudes, I need you to spread the word. We're going to do a Bible and beers on Thursday night at 6 p.m. So hope to see all of you there. All right, keep warm, bundle up.
Thank
you guys. Bye, Sarah.
Okay.